Once upon a time, on a warm summer's day, a young girl named Alice sat with her sister on a riverbank. The day was calm, the air warm, and Alice's mind began to wander. She grew tired of sitting still, and as her sister read a book with no pictures, Alice's attention drifted. Suddenly, something quite strange happened. A white rabbit, dressed in a waistcoat and holding a pocket watch, hurried past her. "Oh dear! Oh dear! I shall be late," the rabbit muttered anxiously. Alice, full of curiosity, jumped to her feet and followed the rabbit, who disappeared down a large rabbit hole beneath a hedge. Without thinking, Alice leaned forward and fell in. Down she tumbled into the dark hole, which seemed to have no end. She passed shelves, cupboards, and maps as she slowly drifted downward, as if floating. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alice landed softly on a pile of leaves. When she stood up, Alice found herself in a strange hallway lined with doors of every size. At one end of the hall was a small glass table with a tiny golden key on top. Nearby, she noticed a curtain and behind it, a very small door, no bigger than a mouse hole. She tried the key, and it fit. But she was far too big to fit through the door. How curious, Alice thought. Then, on the table, she spotted a small bottle with a label that read, "Drink me." Alice, being curious and not afraid of the oddness of Wonderland, took a sip. Suddenly, she began to shrink. She grew smaller and smaller until she was the perfect size to fit through the little door. But just then, Alice realized she had forgotten the key on the table, which was now too high to reach. As she looked around for another solution, she found a cake with a note that said, "Eat me." She took a bite, and to her surprise, she began to grow taller and taller, so tall that her head nearly touched the ceiling. Now she was too big again to go through the door. Distressed, Alice started to cry, but her tears formed a large pool of water around her. She soon shrank back down again, and now she was swimming in a sea of her own tears. As she paddled along, she met a mouse and other curious creatures who were also caught in the pool. They all swam to the shore together. After drying off, Alice wandered deeper into Wonderland. It wasn't long before she encountered the Cheshire Cat, a large striped cat with a wide grin that stretched from ear to ear. The cat could disappear at will, leaving only its smile behind. "Where should I go from here?" Alice asked the cat. The Cheshire Cat replied, "That depends on where you want to go." Alice explained that she wasn't quite sure, and the cat simply grinned and said, "In that case, it doesn't much matter which way you go." Alice continued on her journey and soon came upon a strange tea party being held by the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. The two were sitting at a long table filled with cups, teapots, and mismatched plates, but instead of drinking tea, they were arguing loudly and acting quite mad. They invited Alice to join them, though there were no clean cups or chairs to sit on. The Hatter, wearing a large top hat, asked Alice silly riddles like, "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" to which there was no sensible answer. The tea party was filled with absurdities, and after a while, Alice grew tired of the nonsense and left. As she ventured further, she stumbled upon the Queen of Hearts' garden, where playing cards in the shape of soldiers were painting white roses red. The Queen of Hearts was fierce, her temper always on edge, and she ruled her kingdom with a single phrase, "Off with their heads." Alice watched in amazement as the Queen's soldiers played a bizarre game of croquet, where flamingos were used as mallets and hedgehogs as balls. The game was chaotic and unfair, with the Queen changing the rules as she pleased. In the middle of the game, the White Rabbit reappeared and hurried Alice away to a strange courtroom. The Knave of Hearts was on trial for stealing the Queen's tarts. The jury was made up of various Wonderland creatures, including the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. The evidence was nonsensical, and the trial became increasingly chaotic as everyone argued and shouted. The Queen demanded that Alice be taken away and punished, yelling, "Off with her head," once again. At that moment, Alice felt herself growing larger and larger until she towered over everyone in the courtroom. She realized that Wonderland was becoming more and more ridiculous by the second. "You're nothing but a pack of cards," she cried, brushing the soldiers away. Suddenly, everything began to spin, and the world of Wonderland faded. Alice found herself back on the riverbank, with her sister gently shaking her awake. It had all been a strange and wonderful dream. As Alice sat up and dusted herself off, she smiled to herself, remembering the whimsical creatures and the topsy-turvy adventures she'd had in Wonderland. Though she was back in her own world, Alice knew that the magic of Wonderland would stay with her forever, reminding her that curiosity and imagination could take her to the most extraordinary places. And so, Alice returned to her life, but with a heart full of wonder, always ready for the next adventure.